Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Ryan Bossery, and welcome back to our Project CRX build. So we're actually at the 3-month mark now. We have 3 months until SEMA. So we actually don't know quite yet if the car's actually going to go to SEMA. We're still trying to hear back from some of our vendors and the people that we work with. Probably won't know for a good 3, potentially 4 weeks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pretend like that it is going. I'm going to do everything that I need to get the car finished up. And today we're going to be looking at the last bits of mock-up before we actually pull the engine. We're also going to show you guys the techniques and stuff that I will use to get with the paint shop and figure out how we ultimately want the engine bay to look, and all the little details that could easily be overlooked. I'm going to go through everything with the paint shop and I'll show you guys the steps on that. So let's go ahead and jump into it and figure out exactly what we need to finalize mock-up and get the engine out of the car. So I had our buddy Chris from Wisecraft come through and design a couple really key parts for this car. He rebuilt the Mugen exhaust and basically built us something custom all the way up to the muffler. I can show you guys that a bit later. And then what I want to show you right now is a really cool catch tank that he actually created for us. I decided that I wanted to kind of get a little tricky with some of the plumbing on the tank. And I want to show you guys some of the lines that I kind of custom created. And I really thought outside of the box on this one, even though our catch tank is a box. I thought outside of it with the way that I wanted to plumb and kind of create something that really flows with the rest of the car. So basically what I had Chris do was make something that would fill the void of this space behind the headlight. Now if you look at the rest of our bay, now a lot of stuff's kind of missing, but we have a tank on this side, which is not there right now. It's going to be an aluminum tank. And then on this other side, we have this aluminum tank. So it's very symmetrical that way. And you could tell that it would be evenly distributed, kind of a weight, if you will, where there's a tank here and a tank here. Also, all of our lines are basically going to be a straight line. We have very little curvatures of our fuel, water, and everything oil related. So what I wanted to do was actually relocate this PCV hose right here. And what the goal was, generally it would come out of this hole right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put an AN cap on the end of this union. I found a thread pitch that matched to a -4 union, and I'm going to put a -4 cap on the end of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to relocate this fitting and re-tap a bung on top. This way it's going to give us a nice straight line from here to here, and it's going to really keep the flow of all the other lines. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give this back to Chris, and I'm going to have him put his logo right here, because I think that's a really cool touch. This is also a piece that you guys will be able to actually purchase from his website if you wanted it. So it would be it's a custom part, but it'll be available through Chris if you guys want it. I'm trying to keep everything on this car 100% just out of a catalog, essentially, so you could just call a company and order it. It's kind of the goal of the project. So it's going to go back to Chris for that logo, and it's also going to go back to Chris for our second ventilation hose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this valve cover, have this modified so it's basically eliminated. I'm going to have that shaved. That's where it used to re-enter through the intake scoop. So this is actually just going to get shaved off, so just imagine that clean shaved. And then on this side, what we're going to do is we're going to weld a bung, and we're going to have a baffle built into that bung, and then we're going to add a hose like this. It's going to come out, and then it's going to enter our catch tank. So it's going to be another straight line fitting, just like this one, straight line. Okay, so that's basically where I'm at right now. I need to take a little bit of measurement and figure out exactly where I'm going to be placing these two bungs. But I'll have Chris in the time of the car being at the paint shop, I'll have him rework his canister. So another mock-up item that I have to do on the car is the wiring harness. What I ended up doing was taking our off-the-shelf Rywire Raychem mil-spec harness, and test fitting it onto the engine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a few adjustments for the ITBs, which will be pretty much underneath the intake manifold, the ITB intake manifold. Also, I want to have a custom cut length for the harness, so where it enters the firewall and it's going to go through one of our Canon connectors, one of the mil-spec connectors, through our firewall. I wanted to get a really nice measurement for that, so it can just flow the best in the bay and look like it's really meant to be there in a custom tailored fit. So what I did here was basically take one of our Raychem engine harnesses for our K series and just kind of laid it on the engine. This is just giving me an idea to see exactly how much reworking that I have to do for the ITBs and how many changes I kind of want to make. It's also going to give me my cut length for the firewall. So if you guys see, I just laid on the coil pack section, and then the wiring harness kind of merges right about there, and then it goes around over the mount, along the rear subframe, and then into the car. So that's about where our mil-spec connector is going to sit. And what I wanted to do is just get a perfect cut length for this harness, so I know exactly where I need that bulkhead to be placed through the firewall, and just any other adjustments that I need to do on this harness. Like you can see that those are actually some ID 2000 injector clips that are on the end of that engine harness. And what we have is these blue RDX injectors for the application. So I can change those things out, switch those around a little bit. I'm going to be removing things like the idle motor, that we're not going to end up using that. This harness is also fitted with like a little boost solenoid spare wire, and we're not going to need that because we don't have forced induction. Throttle position sensor stuff is actually going to get reworked and then fit to the AT Power ITB TPS sensor. You can see it right there. Overall, I'm just kind of test fitting everything and trying to get an idea of any last minute detail things that I need to address before I pop the engine out of here. So since this car is going to the body shop, one thing that I really want to do is make sure that the body shop does a good job. And to ensure that, what I've done is I've basically marked the firewall in every location that I feel that I want to be eliminated or shaved or a bracket removed. I just placed an X. So I just took a Sharpie pen and I just like made X's all over the engine bay. You guys can see, for example, we won't be using those brackets, so I ended up putting X's right there. Also, there was a couple little inconsistencies, like this hole right here is actually from probably an alarm, like alarm buzzer or something like that, you know, like a horn, and that's not factory, so I want them to just essentially shave it. All the other little holes, for example, like these threaded M6 holes, I'm just gonna go ahead and leave them. I actually really prefer the look of that. The brackets and stuff I definitely want gone, but if it's something that was original to the car, I'm actually really fine with it. So what I'm gonna do, like let's take this for example. That was an old emissions device bracket where like the map sensor and the purge solenoid sat, and we're totally not using that, and it just looks out of place. So we're gonna definitely be eliminating things like that. This is our old fuel filter bracket. That one's gonna go away as well. Definitely don't need a use for that. The one beside it was also like a charcoal canister mount, and that charcoal canister mount is not needed, so I'm gonna definitely ditch it. And we also need to make room for our mil-spec connector plate. So I'm gonna bring a mil-spec connector plate to the body shop and kind of show them where I want that plate to be for our wiring harness to go through. But as you can see, there's all these little X's, and anything that's a gaping hole that's gonna be going straight through the firewall, I definitely kind of feel like it's almost like a safety hazard. So if you have these huge holes gaping through the firewall, we really need those at least covered up. So any of the really large like gaping holes in the firewall, my strategy actually has been for the last probably 10 years is to just take some body adhesive, piece of metal, and just adhere it to the back of the firewall. And then you can go back with like a kind of like a wet finger, and then you could just wipe sealant in between the gaps. A little bit of prep after that, and essentially it's like shaving the bay. What it ends up looking like is like factory if they just didn't punch it out. So that's kind of the goal, to keep it looking really good, simple, and kind of factory, but then kind of modified at the same time. So one thing that I did was actually raise the engine to the higher position. And by doing that, it did bring it closer to the hood. So I'm probably gonna have to trim a little bit out of the hood, but everything on the bottom of the engine that was kind of a concern. Ground clearance, alternator clearance, and transmission clearance to the radius rod all became even greater. So that was actually a huge plus. I was able to get a lot more ground clearance and just a bit less hood clearance. In doing so, the transmission in the rear actually about where the subframe would be.
But as you guys can see in the rear here, it gets really tight. So the transmission is almost sitting up against the rear subframe. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to actually clearance that out just a little bit to be able to make a little bit more room so I can actually kind of feel comfortable that it's not gonna smack up against it when we shift gears. So Chris from Wisecraft actually built this exhaust system for us. It's really cool. He did a resonator right here, all mandrel bends with really nice welds, V-band right there, and then it butts right up against the Mugen muffler. If you guys could see, still got the tips, the Mugen tips, got the badge, but we ended up going all custom from here back.
All right, so my next step is to get this engine pulled out of the car. All right, it was successful. Got the engine out. It's ready to go to paint.